Okay, let's keep it going. Just finished talking about my octopus encounter with basically one that just looked like this guy. But here's one that I would never encounter because these are much deeper in the ocean. And I know some of you have heard of these. This is a Dumbo octopus. So they are found very deep in the darkness of the ocean, which you can kind of tell from the picture. And they're just cool and weird, and people think they look like Dumbo the elephant, and so these are Dumbo octopus. All right, so the next category or phylum of invertebrates that we're going to go over would include echinoderms, and let's take a look at what we got here. So number one, we have a sea star. Number two is a brittle star. The number threes, hold on, are sea cucumbers, which I don't know why they haven't fixed the names of sea cucumbers yet, because they are definitely not cucumbers, but they got to come up with a different name for those. Fours are sea urchins, and then I don't know what's going on with this five right here. It looks like they blanked something out. Maybe they made a mistake and had to remove something. But hopefully you guys can kind of recognize what this is. There was actually a fossil of one of these in the fossil lab. And what it is a sand dollar is what we usually call them. So echinoderm, derm, I'm sure some of you have heard that word, like in dermatology, represents skin, and echino means bumpy. So they have radial symmetry. So in evolution, radial symmetry returned. So things went bilateral for a long time, and then radial symmetry returned, and so they have kind of this round type of design. They have the first endoskeleton, which is actually the kind of skeleton that we have as well. So some people kind of speculate that we share some kind of ancestry. I tend to not agree with that, but they do have the first endoskeletons or internal skeletons. And they also have an interesting water vascular system that allows them to move, where they use hydraulic tubes and pump water through them in order to move. And some of you have probably been to aquariums where they let you pick them up, and you might actually see the little tube feet moving around. And they're not using muscle, they're actually pumping water in different ways into these tubes to create movement. So here's just some interesting sea stars, and then we also see some sea urchins, which are also echinoderms. You may have seen urchins like these before. This is a brittle star. We were actually supposed to have a brittle star fossil in the fossil lab, but we think the teacher that gives us the fossils might have taken it home, and that's the fossil I switched it out for the sand dollar, because both are echinoderms. Here again are some sea urchins. So here's kind of like a normal type, not too dangerous. These, on the other hand, are quite dangerous. So just another heads up if you go out snorkeling or something, is these ones actually have like hooked barbs at the end of their spines that can be very difficult to remove. I think they might be a little toxic, but I think it's more about like how hard they are to remove. They're like super crazy fishhook type sort of design. And I have found some of these when I was swimming near where my parents live, not the beach that's right by their house, but this one nearby. And it was really weird. The spines, I found one, it was probably, this part of it was probably the size of a volleyball, and the spines were waving around, and it actually, I think it knew I was there, which was super weird, because I'm not really sure about their anatomy, but I don't know where their eyes are or how they sense things, and it seemed to be waving the spines around as I got closer to it, and I got some videos of it, and it's just, they're weird. So they also can be kind of hidden in the coral, so you want to be really careful and aware of these, and definitely not touch them. Here we have some sea cucumbers, which are definitely kind of weird. And in Unit 5, we learned about detritivores. And sea cucumbers fall into that category where they consume detritus, which is sort of like the dead stuff and even poop that settles to the bottom of the ocean or on coral. And sea cucumbers help clean that up, which is actually a good, that's playing a positive role in the ecosystem by being detritivores. Okay, and then we're going to finish up with arthropods, which are, for some people the most interesting and certainly the most diverse, as we're going to get into. Arthropods are incredibly successful group of, they're the most successful group of life almost of all, as we'll get into. So here we see some different categories of arthropods. So let's break that down. So pod, like podiatry or a podiatrist, works on feet. And then arthro, like if you have arthritis, most of you probably understand that means you have problems with your joints. So this actually translates to jointed feet, because as we look at these different animals, they have these jointed legs and jointed body parts. So here you can see some different types. Okay, so they have bodies that are in segments, which isn't a first. That first already happened. But they have the first really complex jointed parts. Like they have wings and weird mouth parts and legs that are all really complex. They have the first and only exoskeleton, which is an external skeleton made of a material called chitin, and which chitin allows it to be kind of flexible, which is good for them. And so we might say crabs fall into this category. So somebody might say, well, crab, let's eat the, if you like crab or lobster, you might say, oh, let's break into the shell and get the meat. And actually, it is technically not a shell. Earlier we went over that mollusks make shells, and it's technically an exoskeleton, but probably at the seafood restaurant people are not going to say the word exoskeleton and just continue to use the word shell. And they also go through a certain type one type of metamorphosis, which means they change from a larva into a sexually mature adult that's able to reproduce, and we'll talk about that. And then finally, they have the most biodiversity of any phylum on Earth. So on your cladograms, all those individual branches, this branch, the arthropod branch, which I think in your drawing was a grasshopper, has more biodiversity, more variety of species than any other branch on that cladogram or any other phylum of life. So this means 60% of all species are a type of arthropod. So if we counted up every individual species on Earth, 6 out of 10 or 60 out of 100 would actually fall just into this one type of invertebrate animal. And 85% of all animals, so 85 out of 100 of all animal species are arthropods, which is incredible. And part of why these numbers are so large and these percentages are so big is because 1 out of 4 of all species on Earth is believed to be some type of beetle. So then the question is, why have beetles diversified so much? And the reason that I think is taking place here is a couple things. One, they've been around for a really long time. And then another reason is they're pretty sturdy. Beetles are pretty sturdy organisms. And then I think a big part of it has to do with just that they lay a lot of eggs. So by laying a lot of eggs, that allows for more mutations. Those mutations may have some positive benefits and result in new evolution of new species. So in some ways, one could argue that the most successful life forms of all time, if we talk about biodiversity, are the beetles. So this picture is illustrating 2 different types of metamorphosis that they go through. So here we have one where they kind of just get bigger. So not what we would usually consider metamorphosis. And then this one here, they've actually changed. So if we look at this one here, it's not the same as the ladybug. So there's definitely been some changes that have taken place. And it's actually gone through this kind of pupa phase, which we associate obviously with caterpillars and butterflies, right? A caterpillar is not just a small version of a butterfly. That would be this one over here. But actually, I think this is called complete and incomplete metamorphosis, I think is the difference between the two. Okay, so be ready to answer some questions about the pictures, because basically for the rest of the slideshow I have a lot of interesting pictures. So some of the questions coming up in the assessment will be what you think about the pictures, so take these in. And we're going to start with some cool caterpillars. So here we have kind of like an inchworm kind of caterpillar. Okay, here's like a really big, sort of beefy looking caterpillar with some cool colors. Here's just kind of a weird one. I believe there's a Pokemon that was designed after this one, so this one might look a little familiar if you're into Pokemon. Here's a weird one. It looks like it's covered in fur. Probably is a defense, because some caterpillars, as we'll see here, have really incredible defenses. This one does not look like it has defense. It looks very gooey and sort of jelly looking and just really cool and weird. And you can see it's been eating the leaf down here and just has these weird structures. I'm not a caterpillar expert, but definitely weird. And here's another angle on this clear jelly looking one. Here's another jelly one, more green looking, but again just really strange caterpillar. Here's another one that has the jelly as well as kind of these hairs or something. Again, I'm guessing those hairs are a defense. Here's another weird one. Doesn't look too spiky, but these defenses probably help keep birds from eating it. This one almost looks like it might be toxic or something. Okay, this one, very spiky and clearly a defense that would help protect it. And I remember one time as a kid, like in elementary school, seeing one sort of like this and being like, oh wow, cool, and touching it and not just getting hurt, but actually feeling sort of like a chemical burn, like it had some kind of toxic defense to it. Here's another one with these very spiky, pointy looking defenses, and to me this one kind of looks like the Magic School Bus from the Magic School Bus cartoons. So that's kind of weird, where we got the windows along the side. Here's another type, just kind of a cool sort of alien-looking caterpillar. Here's one that's covered in a lot of defenses, a lot of little spikes. I think this is the type that I touched, very similar to this when I was a kid. And again, they're like toxic. They have like poisons on these tips, so you want to be really careful. Don't just like touch caterpillars because they look interesting. They could be toxic. Here's another one with some, pretty interesting defenses on it that it's evolved. Here's a close-up of one of these caterpillars where you're going to really see its like face and all these spikes all over it. And here's a close-up of another one. So definitely some weird caterpillars to check out. And they're going to turn into something maybe really beautiful and fragile, like a butterfly. And these butterflies are in particularly really cool because their wings are so thin, they're just a couple cells thick, that they're actually transparent or translucent. I sometimes get those two mixed up, but where we can see light through them. And here's a photo of a bunch of different ones. So there's just a very thin layer of cells in their wings, and that allows you to see light, and we can even see a background through it. All right, I'm going to stop there. And we'll start with this guy.